think entrepreneurialism's more and more important because we have to start thinking of a product as its own business. When you're developing a product, you're providing a service. So therefore, what's your product's identity? What's your product's branding? What's your marketing? What's the principles? What's the values? You've got to act like you own that product, regardless of whether you're the product owner. You've still got to treat the product like you are the CEO of that business.
Welcome, Jen.
Thank you.
So, welcome to Warrington.
Thank you.
Just talking about the Warrington market and a comedy night.
Yeah.
So we're all settled in. Thank you for coming, first and foremost. Put a post out on LinkedIn, and then you sent me a message straight away, and I really appreciate you spending the time. Obviously, done a bit of LinkedIn stalking to generate some questions. So apart from being a disruptor, someone who lives and breathes Agile, being safe and SPC certified, Prince 2 practitioner, and someone who helps empower teams through coaching and mentoring. Who is Jenn Rigby?
Jenn Rigby is a 28-year-old woman. She's trying to make a difference to other younger, especially women or those who identify as female, within the workplace to show that you can progress, you can make a name for yourself within STEM industries. I'm big into reading. I like to make jewelry. I'm quite crafty as well. So I like to be quite creative. I'm also on the side, I'm also a life coach and a hypnotherapist. So like to bring that into the workplace as well and kind of create a holistic approach to the workplace, like acknowledging people as people and not just as a worker or a resource. They are people, and to really bring that human element into pretty much everything I do, really.
So picking up on the STEM side then, back when you were in school, was that something you were aware of, or did you sort of fall into it over time?
I fell into it over time. So like in school, I was good at maths, science, IT, enjoyed languages more. So I did languages for my A-levels and like humanities, sociology, psychology, and then did a degree in languages. But I remember when I was in IT and I did my GCSE, and I remember doing my final exam for IT and saying, I am never touching a computer again. I'm not doing it. And I really didn't like the way it was taught in schools, and I wasn't really aware of STEM being such a, I guess, hot topic. And I don't know if it was such a hot topic back when I was in school, rather than like how it is now. There's quite a focus on it.
It was just Excel.
Yeah.
Make a PowerPoint.
Excel.
And pretend you're running a business for a day or something.
Yeah.
I didn't do IT in school, but I know that was the case.
Yeah, and we had to build websites like MySpace and Pixo kind of websites. And
Pixo, that takes me back.
Yeah,
Everyone
shows everyone's age. But yeah, it wasn't meaningful. There was no like, so what to it. It didn't give me that sense of reward. So I kind of moved away from like IT, and like I say, went into more of the humanity side. And then when I got my degree, I was like, I just need a graduate job. I want to get out, I want to progress. And because the role that I held while I was in uni, I was a manager, I felt I couldn't go back to not being a manager, because I just like to naturally lead, like naturally manage people.
And what was that first managerial experience?
I was a shift manager at McDonald's.
Okay.
It was really interesting, taught me a lot very, very quickly, because it was so dynamic in the workplace. So it really made you think on your feet, like what's going to happen, because you never knew where it was going to be. So I worked at one in St. Helens. So if Saints were on, you didn't know if you were going to get a coach full of fans within 10 seconds, and all of a sudden you had to put in like 6 baskets of fries, and you just didn't know what was going to happen. But because of that, and because of like my approach to work, I knew I needed to go into something management wise. And my dad has done project management, portfolio management, and said, well, why don't you look into project management, see if that's something you're interested in. Applied for a few different roles, and then ended up with within IT project management doing a graduate scheme, and then just fell back in love with IT, because I saw it wasn't just Excel and PowerPoint and building little websites.
Going back to the McDonald's thing for a second, because I'm sure lots of people will want to know this.
Yeah.
Do they break the milkshake machines on purpose? Because every time I go, the milkshake machine's out of order.
No, they don't. It's because the machines are quite big, and if one little particular part goes, the whole machine has to come.
Just wanted to clear
they don't do it on purpose.
Just wanted to clear it up. I was also looking, went down a bit of a rabbit hole in your LinkedIn profile and saw that you were a special constable, was it?
Yeah.
In the police. Can you share a bit about that and the motivations behind it?
Yeah, so when I was younger, I always wanted to be in the police. It was like childhood dream. So that, like, my family, my dad, my brother were in the RAF. So it was kind of, I was always in that environment of like defense and protection, and really wanted to be a police officer. I used to write stories about my police horse that was called Thunder. It was a brown, a black mane, and it had a lightning bolt on its forehead, and it was called Thunder. And I'd always write these little comic books about it. When we used to play, I'd always dress up as a police officer and do obstacle courses and arrest my siblings. And my mum and dad even made me like a little police card. So it was always something I wanted to do. So when the opportunity came up and I found out that you could be a special constable, I thought, well, while I'm at uni, I may as well get some of the experience and see if that's something I want to get into. It really scratched the itch. But because I did my year abroad, I ended up dropping out because I couldn't be in a different country and be in the police at the same time.
Okay, so first question, where did you sort of police? Where was that?
So I was based around St Helens, but I was part of Merseyside Police.
Okay, cool. And where did you do your year away?
I spent the first semester I was in Lisbon, and the second semester I was in Alicante.
Oh, cool. All right. I just think it's interesting in terms of when we talk about Agile and trying to make a workspace somewhere where people want to be, and we talk about intrinsic motivation. I think one has to be quite intrinsically motivated to be a special constable. So yeah, full respect. Any good stories? Any juicy things from your time in there?
Not really. It was very. I'll tell you what, I wish I had my Fitbit on me back then, because you didn't half get your steps in. It was quite fun, and like just getting to see the behind the scenes of what went on, and like the processes. Like you see the like public display of what like police officers go through, like when they're doing something, but then you see all the behind the scenes of all the computer systems, the paperwork, everything that happens in the background. Yeah. It was really interesting, and just networking and seeing like the different elements of the police that there were, and where your career could go within the police was really interesting.
But the pull to IT and project management was a bit more than joining the police full time. I
think it was more because I knew if I went back into the police, I wouldn't necessarily have that management responsibility. And I was, to be completely honest, I really couldn't cope with shift work anymore.
Okay, that's fine.
It was just, I found it really difficult, especially trying to juggle like home life and all of that. I just wanted a 9 to 5 and get that Friday feeling.
I think that's like really self-aware, to be honest. Like some people wouldn't be brave enough to admit that. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Agile then.
Yeah.
Let's dive into that rabbit hole of a subject. Simple. It's not a trick question, but what does Agile mean to you as you sit here today?
Common sense, first and foremost. If it feels wrong, follow it. Explore why you feel it's wrong. There's got to be a better way. So like just because something works doesn't mean you can't improve it. So tug on that, and if something feels right again, follow it. Do something about it. Very much like a mindset and a culture as well. Like it's all well and good doing Agile, using Scrum as the example, following the Scrum guide exactly as it says. But you have to take it that layer deeper and be Agile, bring that mindset. Is it right that we follow the same 3 questions every day, but people keep giving the same answers because it's repetitive? How do we change that up, and how do we make it right? So always thinking about like what makes sense, what's the best way we can do this, and how can we be more dynamic? So yeah, I think it's a mixture of mindset, culture, and just common sense.
Fair enough. And where do you think, in your experience, organizations go wrong in terms of Agile or agility, and the reasons behind that?
I think there's a sense of having to do it. Like companies feel like we must be Agile because it's the latest buzzword, but not understanding what that truly means and the amount of time, effort, investment that goes into it. Even if it's like implicit investment rather than explicit, there's always something that has to give. You've got to have a trade-off. A lot of people forget the human factor of it. They expect people can just switch all of a sudden. 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, we're all Agile. Well, what does that mean? And why are we doing it? Yeah. And again, it's going back to that why do we feel the need to be Agile? And is that necessarily the right answer? And does it have to be as big as putting all these labels and posters up to say, we are now Agile? Is it not just doing something better? And people revert back too quickly as well. So sometimes like you'll see a really like in terms of agility, it'll be a successful implementation of whatever it looks like for that company. But it starts to show all the cracks, and it starts to show what's really painful for people in the organization. So one of my previous teams a while ago were working in 3-week sprints. We changed them back to 2-week sprints, and everyone was like, everything's broken. The process is broken. We can't do all the work in 2 weeks. And we were like, well, that's the point, because the process needs to change. So rather than treating the cause of treating the process, they wanted to revert back to 3-week sprints just to carry on. And it's like, well, you can't make excuses for something when you really want to change.
Yeah, when people say, well, we'll just extend the sprint.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a solution, but it's probably a temporary one, putting a plaster over, a bigger problem or a bigger leak. What does your sort of landscape look like at the moment? How many teams are you dealing with? Agile coach, Scrum Master, RTE, what does that look like?
So I've got 4 Scrum teams at the minute, and I also have a team of BAs that work alongside us as what we call the supporting team. So in the RTE, we have, in the train, we've got me as the RTE, we've got a product manager, we've got an architect, and then we've got a few extra roles like development lead, automation people. So we have the BAs who work alongside us. So that's on my actual project focus and stuff. And then internally, we're looking at setting up some Agile guilds, bringing all the Scrum Masters together, instilling best practices, instilling that mindset, that education piece, and trying to set up a mentoring and buddying, just to create a really consistent standard of workforce and what we mean by Agile, and how you myth bust some of the stuff that you see out there.
Yeah, I don't know about you, and not everyone will agree, but I think sometimes people see the Scrum Master as an easy in, or an easy way to get an increase in wage. Because there's in most organizations the pay is quite respectable for the role. Have you had to deal with any of that, resetting people's expectations when they come into the role?
Yeah, more so I think they underestimate what the Scrum Master does. I think people get the Scrum Master role and they're really excited because they think they just have to run a stand-up, run a planning session, retro review, and jobs are good in.
Put the meetings in Outlook.
Yeah, and become the admin or the Jira manager.
Get the donuts in.
Yeah, and when they actually realise there's a lot more to it in terms of rapport building, influencing, networking, continuous improvement, research, study, there's so much more to it rather than just admin and running meetings.
It's all those intangible benefits, isn't it?
Yeah.
We had a guy on, and he was a guy, working for us, and he left, just his contract extended, which was fine. And then a few weeks later I said, do you miss this person? And the individual said, I couldn't put my finger on what he did, but he's truly missed.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good sign of a Scrum Master who has that silent influence, gently influencing and not pulling the strings, but trying to guide people in the right direction. But that's hard when it comes to yearly reporting and trying to measure people's success, I suppose. So if you're in the Agile kitchen, cooking away, what 3 ingredients do organizations or teams need to benefit from Agile, in your opinion?
I think they need realism. So again, be realistic. Everything isn't always going to work for you. Make something fit your context. And again, use that common sense. If you know something's not working, understand why and probably follow that thread. I definitely think there has to be a people focus, because again, people should be at the heart of everything we do. If we don't have our people, you're not going to have a product, and therefore you're not going to have a business. So you have to really focus on people and listen to them, especially the ones who are resistant to the change or the ways of working, because they see something that you don't, because you're going to have natural bias towards the change because you're an agilist. That's what you want to do.
Yeah.
I think they also have to be risk tolerant. You have to take risks. It's really hard to release control, especially if you're in an organization that's very used to top down, waterfall, very traditional ways of working, or even Agile, but with more of the Scrum Master as the project manager. When you see things like that, it's really hard to release control and say, okay, we'll let the teams do it and they can tell us, and it's okay if we don't get what we've done right. And I think as a cheat ingredient, a little sprinkle, and it is patience. It doesn't work overnight. It's a long process. It's hard, and it's constantly changing. And I think a lot of people don't realize how much time and effort, both mental and physical, goes into something like that. So I think organizations really need to be patient. You're not going to see benefits immediately overnight. It takes time.
And how do you send that message of patience to leadership? Have you got any skills, tricks that people could learn from you?
I think it depends on the person.
Classic
I know,
coaching answer.
I'm sorry.
I'm
I very much believe every individual is exactly that, an individual. So you have to work on, you've got to try and understand the person to understand how you appeal to them to get them to be patient. If you've got someone who's traditionally like a project manager, let's say, and typically project management is always budget. So if you can appeal to someone and say, actually, if you're just a bit patient, you'll save this many hours if we do this, and talk to them in a language that they understand. Sometimes as the RTA, as the coach, I will say, if you are disappointed, if you are like frustrated with what's going on, don't take it out on the teams, take it out on me. I'll be that soundboard for you, just to give it. And sometimes, and that's again one of the other sides of agility that people don't see, is that there is a lot of emotional burden put on like the person who's either the scrum master, the RT, the coach, whatever they are. They do take a lot of that to protect the team.
Yeah, that's really good, really insightful. Sometimes you walk in and people just offload and it's like, I can't absorb all this. I need to, but it can be difficult. You mentioned life coaching, hypnotherapy. Based on that, outside of the Agile bubble, what do you think organizations, or better, people in organizations, should be focusing on outside of the, Scrum, Safe? Is there any additions that you would?
Yeah, so I think nowadays, especially with like new generations coming in, there's a lot more, especially when you see like Gen Z, millennials, there's a lot more focus on accountability and self-awareness, self-development. So I think it's really important that there is an emphasis either on the individual on the individual, or the organisation on the organisation itself, and supporting individuals to go through it. But I think we need to be focusing on self-awareness, self-development, putting the work in, doing things like shadow work, inner child healing, recognise your projections, recognise your triggers. Because if you can't recognise a projection or a trigger either in yourself or someone else, you're going to struggle. And just having that self-awareness, it opens so many doors. It's really difficult to do and it is hard. But once you start to recognise what triggers you, it's really interesting to see how you can then spot that behaviour and start to undo it. Or even if you can't, not cure the behaviour, but if you can't deal with and understand the root cause of where that behaviour comes from, then it just continues to grow and grow and grow.
What is inner child healing? I just picked up on that and I don't know what that means.
So inner child healing is all about basically us as children. So although I am now 28, I'm still the same person I was when I was 3 years old, 2-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old. And especially at that development age, we see a lot of like really, really trivial scenarios that you're in can impact how you think, believe, act as yourself as an adult. And inner child healing is all about going back and giving that inner child what they need. So things like writing love letters to your inner child. It sounds really, really over the top, but it's really difficult to do. Yeah. Like it can be as simple as someone, you went to a party and someone handed out a load of donuts and they didn't give you one, and then therefore every time there's like snacks in the kitchen, you run to make sure you always have a donut, but you don't know why. And it's things like that. So like just writing a letter saying it's okay, you deserved a donut, something as daft as that, can really help you feel more secure in yourself. But it also helps, again, identify those behaviours where it might be your inner child who's taking the driver's seat rather than you as the adult taking the seat.
Sounds a bit like, and you correct me if I'm wrong, the chimp paradox to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Maybe it's slightly different, but controlling that inner person and giving them what they need, because they're the reaction.
Yeah.
They're not they're not rational. It's the other part of the brain trying to take control.
Yeah.
Or the inner child trying to take control.
Yeah.
Is there any books or blogs or anything you would people listening, watching, would you point them in a specific direction or an entry level?
Centre of Excellence do loads of courses on like inner child healing. It's quite hot at the minute. Like even if you just Google it, like there'll be loads of inner child healing you can do.
Anything else outside of the Agile bubble that we enclose ourselves in?
I think entrepreneurialism's more and more important. It does link to agility, I guess, loosely, because we have to start thinking of a product as its own business.
Yeah.
When you're developing a product, you're providing a service. So therefore, what is your product's identity? What's your product's branding? What's your marketing? What's the principles? What's the values? You've got to act like you own that product, regardless of whether you're the product owner. You've still got to like treat the product like you are the CEO of that business.
Yeah.
So I think having those entrepreneurialism skills are really important. So business change, comms, getting excited, getting users excited. And even if it's something that users have to use and it's mandated on them, you've still got to make it a pleasurable experience. So how are you going to do that for them?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think more entrepreneurialism skills are really important because again, it brings it back into the business, but it also helps you with, I guess, cognitive diversity. So when you're talking to different people, you can see where they're coming from. And again, how do you appeal to people back into, like I say, the generation that we're in now where influencing so enormous and marketing, branding, all that is done in a completely different way than it was 5-10 years ago.
And do you find what you do outside of work, with your, you said you're quite creative. How does that filter into the workplace, I suppose? Do you find it benefits because you've got stuff going on outside?
Yeah, I think everyone laughs at me because I have an obsession with like color. Like everything I do is multicolored. I mean, like blue, purple. I've got all my different colors at home. I've got multiple pens. All my post-it notes, everything is color coded. And for me, because I have identified I'm such a creative and visual person, it helps me organize my thoughts and it helps me tell a story. Like the first thing, if there's a problem that comes up, first thing I do is pen and paper and I'll draw it.
Yeah.
And then that helps me then articulate my thinking because I see in pictures. I know it sounds really weird, but when I'm thinking, it's pictures rather than words that I see.
No, I get that.
So it's really hard to change a picture into words. So I have to follow that process. And I think by exploring that creativity outside of work has really helped me bring it back into the workplace and navigate kind of those issues that I have with articulating what I'm thinking.
And did that articulation, did it take a hit during COVID? Because I imagine if you're someone, again, correct me if I'm wrong, you seem like someone who in the office is very creative and putting post-its on the wall and then that disappeared. Did you struggle with that? Did you have to adapt and how did you do that if so?
Yeah, so I think one of the good things about COVID was the increase of collaboration tools, things like Mural, even like Microsoft Paint, things as daft as that. And doing it differently, like how do we again capture people's attention? So can we virtualize those posters? How do we create collaboration with post-its? So like things like Trello, Jira, Mural are really good tools to help with that. But it was quite hard to, like, I missed a whiteboard. One of the things that I kept saying was I just miss a pen and a whiteboard and getting a few people around and just start drawing things out. Because although it's good on those collaboration tools, it's still not the same as like people being able to jump in and say, oh, but do this, or grab the pen off you and say, well, what if you move this here? Like it was quite difficult, but I think I've deeply fell in love with Mural and everyone who works with me knows about it.
And what does your balance look like now? You 80% at home? Like, do you have set collaboration time with the team in the office? What does that look like at the moment?
Yeah, so I'm mostly at home. I tend to go in once a week. So my teams are based like across the country in our different offices. So I tend to go more down south in maybe once a month. I tend to go in, see all them. And then the different teams, I could try to make myself visible and present because again, I think there can be a difficulty in that sometimes when you have people who are in positions of power, like quoting, as like your RT, some people are scared to talk to them because they're the manager, and it's like, well, I'm not the manager, I'm supporting, that's what I'm here to do. So by making myself more visible and like I am a human too, it makes that really easy. I think that was exacerbated in COVID, is that people were a lot more scared to speak to people, and that kind of difference in job description, I think it was really subtly done. I don't think anyone particularly said, right, here are the boundaries, here's the rank. But I think that happened over COVID just because that removal of that human element was there, because you didn't get to see people walking around the office.
And people were like scared to disrupt people, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thankfully, there's a bit more balance now.
Yeah.
I've turned into a bit of a hermit, to be fair. Like, it's taken me a lot to come here today. I'm joking. So outside of Agile, or it could be Agile, I'll leave that up to you. But is there anything you've changed your mind about recently that you never thought you would?
Yes. apart from like the trivial things of like changing my outfit 20 times this morning and all the little things, and do I have toast for breakfast, do I not, like things like that. I think one of the biggest things for me that I've been working on lately is that I don't have to be the savior. Yeah. Like I don't have to be the one that the problem stops with. And I think it's kind of a curse of the job. So when you come in as the Agile coach, everyone thinks you're the silver bullet. And sometimes you apply that to yourself because you're like, I'm the person everyone's turning to for help. And it can be quite a difficult load to bear. And it's something that I'm really trying to work on at the minute, is that actually, yes, I'm here to help shake things up, but you're the one with the context. I can't do this on my own. Yeah. And I've always said to people, like, this isn't going to be right first time, but it's going to be a little bit better. And I don't know all the answers, but I think sticking to that and really following through and saying, okay, well, if you come into me with something that you don't like, that's great, but let's come up with a solution together. And it's okay to say, I actually really don't know how we're going to do this. And again, I think that's something that was exacerbated by COVID again, was that because you didn't have that support network that you could turn to next to you in your desk and say, oh, I'm stuck with this, what do you think? You then started to think about, well, I'm in this role for a reason, so I should know the answers. I'll go away and Google. And it always felt like you had to be the savior. And it comes in like home life as well. Like, as the eldest sibling, I've always felt like I had to be the one who shouldered the burden for people. If something was going on, it was like, well, I've got to be strong for my brother and sister. I've got to be strong for my mum and dad. And that's where, again, that inner child healing's coming through in the workplace, is saying that actually it doesn't have to stop with me. It can go beyond that. And I don't have to be the one that is the silver bullet, and just really making myself believe that.
No, I think we can all take a bit of a lesson from that. We haven't got all the answers.
Yeah.
And it would be boring if we did. If you were talking to your younger self, what advice would you give them?
This was one I really thought about. And without doing my love letters to the inner child.
You can read one out if you want.
Yeah. I came up with kind of two things. So the first one was similar to the previous answer. So you can do hard things and it's okay to find them hard. Like almost giving yourself permission to say, it's all right if you're struggling, it's fine. That you don't have to, again, you don't have to be the savior, you don't have to be the one it stops with. And then the other side is Foghorn Fiona is almost never right. Okay. So Foghorn Fiona is my little voice, my imposter syndrome, my little self-doubt that comes up and says, you can't do this, you shouldn't be here. And it, again, part of the kind of coaching side of things is name that voice, because again, you can treat it as a person, then you can shout it out, and I'm like, Foghorn Fiona, enough, just not having it today. So yeah, she's almost never right.
I wanted to rewind slightly just on what you said at the beginning about women in IT and STEM and things like that. It's always a difficult question as a white, I'm not quite middle-aged yet, but I'm getting there, bloke, to fully understand, because I don't think I ever will, but in your opinion, from your perspective and from what you've been through, what can the community, I'm not going to say what can just men do, because it's a collective effort, what can be done to help whoever get into IT, but especially women or people who identify as women.
So funnily enough, it's something that we were talking about in work yesterday, was a group of women. We were sat around the table and we were just talking about kind of the struggles and just having people listen. Like if we're saying something, listen to us, we're saying it for a reason, and be aware of like your biases, your stereotypes. As an ally, that's what would be probably most beneficial. Just listen and again, do that shadow work. Do I recognize this behavior in myself? If I'm getting triggered by it, I probably do. How can I overcome that? How can I undo that behavior? I think in terms of getting people into STEM, again, it's where, I guess, which perspective you're looking at. So from an organizational point of view, I think one of the things that's really key is that the organization looks at how they support their existing women in their workforce. How do they support women? Because it's quite easy to feel like, oh, I'm the token woman. I'm only here because like I tick a box and I'm here to hit a quota. And it can be quite difficult to have that in the back of your mind. Am I really supposed to be here? And
I get that, because even recording things like this, I would never want anyone to feel like that. But there will always be people out there saying, did he invite those two on just because they were women? And it's like, no, they're interesting people. I don't really, I don't care if they're male, female, or whatever they want to identify with. And we're all on the same journey. I'm sure I could have asked that question a lot better, but I'm still learning. As long as everyone knows that the intent is positive and we're trying to control those biases or we're trying to have the conversation, I suppose.
And that's the key part, is that awareness of the organization and supporting, or wherever you are, supporting those people that you have in place. So like making sure that if you are putting them into a role, who are their support network? Who can they mentor with? Where's their resources that they can like go and identify and like work with those people? Like, how are you providing that support? And then naturally that'll encourage people who identify with those people outside of the workplace, because they'll say, actually, that they're there because they're good at the job, they're good at what they do, it's a field that is accessible to me, I identify with that person and they're successful, so I can do it too. And successful doesn't need to mean CEO, it can mean maintaining a job. It doesn't have to be a rank, it's just they're achieving what they set out to achieve.
Finally, what's next for you?
I'm still trying to find what I want to be when I grow up. Like, it's one of those things, and I'm envious of the people who know what their end goal is, whereas mine seems to change every day. Like, I really enjoy Agile, I really enjoy delivery, but I like playing with operator models and stuff. So I think my like BHAG, my big hairy audacious goal, is I want to be a COO at some point. Like, I think that'd be really, really cool. But then that's just because I heard it in a book and I was like, that sounds like something I really want to do.
No, I think people buy into you have to have a why, and I've never really been a fan of that personally, because I think you're allowed to have lots of little whys. And I don't think people should. I think it's okay for people to change their mind. What's the point of having a mind if you can't change it? I've no doubt you'll get there, but if you change your mind along the way, then that's okay as well.
It's like with going into the police, it scratched the itch, and then I've didn't want to go back, so
completed it.
So what do I want to do next? But I know it's definitely something with motivating people, empowering people, making people's lives easier, making sure we're like always delivering value, regardless of what value looks like to whatever context you're in. Something like that, just working with people and empowering them and just helping people be and do the best that they can and change lives while we're there. That'd be nice.
That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Where can people get hold of you if you're happy to do so? You on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, MySpace, Bebo?
I don't think, well, I might actually still have my old MySpace, but I'm on LinkedIn. I'm under Jenn Rigby, so if people want to connect, then absolutely fine for people to connect with me on there.
Think you very much.
No, thank you.
I think people get a lot from that. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.